right, cool. All right, guys. Well, good to see you both. Pleasure to speak to you again, both. And here we are. Israel just struck Qatar. I can say I didn't expect this. Max, I think you'd be in the same boat. I'm not sure about you, Matt. But I want to start with the first question. Max, you posted a tweet and you had a theory that was really interesting. And you said that Trump's recent ceasefire proposal, and maybe even his tweet, where he said this is your last warning, was designed to lure Hamas leaders into gathering in Doha for Israel to strike while US air defenses stood down. So essentially they got permission from the US to strike, which I think most people agree is the case. You know, you can't have Israeli jets, and Matt, maybe you have a different take. Israeli jets fly all the way and strike Qatar, where there's the biggest US base, without the US being aware. And the purpose of this is to destroy negotiations, as a death knell to negotiations. Max, can you expand on that theory? And I'd love to get Matt's take on it as well.
Yeah, let me just make 3 points about that. First, what is Qatar? I mean, Qatar is a series of oil fields, a neo-colonial carve-out, a monarchic carve-out with the biggest US airbase in the region and a sort of slave class that provides services. And it was doing whatever the US basically wanted. It helped Israel and the US get secure an al-Qaeda takeover of Syria. I mean, that wouldn't have happened without Qatar. And it was essential for the US to take out one of the last independent Arab states, along with Israel, which is taking credit for it. Qatar gave Trump gold watches. It gifted him a $400 million jet that he wants to turn into Air Force One. It has its employees at top levels of the Trump administration. Kash Patel at the FBI was a Qatari lobbyist. Pam Bondi at the AG was the top Qatari lobbyist in the US. Lee Zeldin was a Qatar foreign agent. And this is how the United States repays them. And so it's a message to Turkey, to Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, and even the Emirates that there is nothing you can do to appease a US which has outsourced its entire policy in the region to Israel. Now, Trump did deliver a proposal to Hamas on September 7th after Hamas accepted a series of proposals, which was followed by massive Israeli strikes on Gaza because Israel never wanted to make a deal. The proposal was basically authored by the Israelis. It was 100 words. Trump gave it to them, forced them to gather in Doha, in this US ally, in a sovereign country. And then the same dynamic occurred when Trump was pushing Iran to negotiate with a gun basically to its head, which is that Israel used the negotiations as a form of orchestration to carry out assassination. And so it really shows that Trump is working here for his boss, Netanyahu, who has no intention of a ceasefire, needs to consolidate the ongoing genocide in Gaza in order to keep his government together, or it will end his career and he'll go back to trial for corruption. So the negotiations were always a sham, and now they're completely dead. They're dead, and now the mask is off. Israel never cared about the hostages, and it's what Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said. The hostages are not the most important thing. The most important thing is total victory, and he has said total victory is the expulsion of the Palestinian population. So Israel has just lifted the mask on the negotiations by trying to kill the entire negotiating team, and now it's in final solution mode in Gaza. And while it does that, they know that the hostages will get killed. This is by design, because by killing the hostages or getting the hostages killed, they deprive Hamas of their last piece of political leverage. This is not just me saying it. It's the Hostages and Missing Persons Forum in Israel, which has said that Israel's invasion of Gaza City, where today it just issued an evacuation order for the entire population, is a death sentence for the hostages. It's also been said by Israeli Army Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, but Netanyahu's going ahead with it anyway in what is the crime of the century. And just a few minutes ago, Israel bombed the presidential palace in Yemen. I mean, all red lines are gone now. And I think what we could actually see in the future, since there are no red lines on Israel, is them doing something no one has done since World War II and deploying a nuclear weapon with their secret nuclear weapons program, which has been expanding in the past weeks at the Dimona facility.
Are you saying they struck the presidential palace in Yemen just a few minutes ago?
Yes. They've been bombing the crap out of Sana'a all day. Again, this is a conflict that would end if Israel would just have done a ceasefire in Gaza, but they are in full genocide mode. The reason that Ansar Allah is involved is to force Israel to stop slaughtering the population of Gaza. That's why they've done this Red Sea embargo. And they could end it, but Israel doesn't want to end it. And they've failed militarily to suppress ballistic missile fire from Yemen. They have failed. They cannot stop Ansar Allah militarily, so they are committing state terror after slaughtering the entire cabinet. The entire cabinet.
Yeah, there's a lot of
continue to like rant with the same crap that we always hear being pushed from that side.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Talking about Qatar just doing the will of the United States government. If that's the case, I don't know why Qatar didn't kick Hamas out of Qatar back in November of 2024 when we told them to go ahead and get them out of the country because they refused to actually negotiate. You know, their take on negotiation is making sure that the IDF completely and totally withdraws from the Gaza Strip, right? That is their negotiation. That's what they brought to the table. IDF needs to withdraw from the Gaza Strip and maybe we'll release everybody. And again, you at least properly label them. They are hostages underneath, UN law, right? They are hostages. As such, the people that took them and the way that they're negotiating with the hostages' lives in order to push their political and ideological agenda falls underneath the term of terrorism. So stop, please, for the love of God, trying to paint them as a political party because they're not. They are quite literally a terrorist organization by definition. That's why I'm talking to you from a microphone, not from a banana. All right. Now, in addition to that, you also failed to mention that the day prior to that, over inside of Jerusalem, 2 Hamas terrorists went in and slaughtered civilians on a bus. They were confirmed members of the Al-Qassam brigades when the Al-Qassam brigades came out of the West Bank and confirmed for a fact that they in fact conducted that terror attack. Now, over inside of Qatar, the commander of the Al-Qassam brigades and Hamas in the West Bank was there for that strike. That's what's known as an imminent threat underneath international law, and Israel has every single right to take out that threat. And when Qatar, just literally today, the deputy prime minister called Israel their enemy, Israel has no business believing that if they would have told Qatar the strike was coming, that they wouldn't have tipped off Hamas. And so not only did you have the literal person that was in charge of that attack from the day prior inside of that strike, you also have the person that is in control of the lives of the hostages over inside of Qatar. 2 terrorists on the target, and Israel targeted them with proportionality in accordance with international law, period. And to suggest that the United States for some reason would want al-Jawlani in charge over inside of Syria is absolute lunacy. That's absolute lunacy. He was a former member of Al-Qaeda. He was friends with al-Baghdadi. And you're right, the current commander-in-chief of the United States military hated al-Baghdadi. He hated ISIS. He wasn't friends with him. He wasn't happy to have him. He bragged. One of the best brags, I think, that most Americans like reminisce on TV was when Trump gave his speech about Jawlani being killed. And when you talk about Ansar Allah and you talk about Israel bombing the presidential palace over inside of Yemen, I'm glad you actually called him Ansar Allah and not the official government of Yemen, because they're not. So just because somebody's sitting inside of the presidential palace inside Yemen doesn't mean that they're in charge of the country, does it? Not only
the official government of Yemen is in a hotel room in Saudi Arabia.
I let you ramble for a long time, sir, and I got to address the falsities that you claimed, because not only have they been targeting Israel, they've also been targeting all sorts of merchant vessels over inside of the Red Sea, all sorts of them, to again push a political and ideological agenda, again known as terrorism. You also called it the final solution over inside Gaza and alleged that Israel, for some reason, would somehow want to see all those hostages get killed. You forget absolutely the amount of Israelis that ended up getting murdered 2 years ago. Israel does have to make a horrible decision, right? The safety of the people inside of Israel from a terrorist organization that's a stone throw away from them, that fired over 5,000 rockets that day, and the safety of the Israeli people, or the lives of potentially 20 that are left.
Max?
Well, the official government of Yemen is in a hotel room in Saudi Arabia, but Ansar Allah controls the major cities and is the de facto government. of Yemen after defeating a criminal military war against it. Matt Tardio is using the definition of terrorism as spelled out and marketed by Benjamin Netanyahu. It's a definition of terrorism which is simply designed to label anyone Israel wants to kill or demonize as an enemy that it can slaughter. And it's the same kind of trick that the Trump administration is using to label Venezuela a narco-terrorist government so that it can rob it of its oil and minerals at gunpoint. No one believes this kind of language anymore. And if we want to talk about terrorism, let's talk about the civilian death rate in Gaza being 83%, according to an internal Israeli army assessment, which has been leaked in Israeli media. Let's talk about Israel killing 17 people in tents today in Gaza City. That is terrorism. Terrorism is attacking a civilian population to achieve a goal. Terrorism is forcing 300,000 people in Gaza City to march south like cockroaches in a bottle. Terrorism is attacking the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis, as Israel did last week, to slaughter a journalist who worked for Reuters, and then slaughter the rescue team and other journalists, including Mariam Abu Daga, who worked for AP, a group of journalists, a week after the terrorist attack on Anas al-Sharif at Al Jazeera. Terrorism is so much of what we've witnessed in Gaza, going back to attacks and massacres we can't even remember, like the assault on the Maghazi refugee camp when Israel dropped a series of 2,000-pound bombs on a densely packed refugee camp. And there was no target there at all. And what did Netanyahu say? Oh, a tragic mishap. This is deliberate terrorism designed to achieve a political goal of expulsion, ethnic cleansing. And Netanyahu has spelled out the goal. He's having the Israeli army bomb major high-rise towers in Gaza City, the same way that Al-Qaeda attacked high-rise towers in New York City in 2001. It is terrorism. And he said in May 2025, this year, to the Knesset, that Israel is destroying homes in Gaza, so the people in Gaza will have nowhere else to go but the outside. That is the agenda, as spelled out by Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who has said that if foreign countries in Europe and elsewhere would each take 50,000 Gazans, the problem would be solved, because Israel needs to consolidate its ethno-supremacist Zionist system, and it cannot have 2 million refugees living in Gaza City. So this is about terrorism. In fact, Israel's doctrine is terrorism. It's called the Dahiyya Doctrine. It was designed by Gabi Ashkenazi in 2006 to attack, named after a neighborhood Israel totally flattened in Beirut, in order to terrorize the civilian population, in order to turn on their government, and it failed. So let's do away with the phony definition of terrorism that Netanyahu marketed, in which anything that the West does or that Israel does is defending itself, and anything that anyone does against it to rise up from under occupation, from under siege, from under ethnic cleansing, anytime they pick up arms, it's terrorism.
7th, Max?
Sorry?
Was Gaza occupied on October 7th?
Gaza was formally occupied. I've been to Gaza.
So, no, it wasn't occupied on October 7th. If you're denying that Gaza was occupied. So now what I'd like to do,
no, you just asked me a question.
Is address some of the things that he said, Mario. No, because you know what the answer is. It doesn't require you to answer, because the answer is quite frankly no.
I'm going to give you an answer.
So Mario, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to address about.
I'll let you address all the points.
UN Resolution 181, Gaza was controlled by the sky. All Gaza's borders were controlled and sealed off. Israel had remote-controlled machine guns mounted on the frontiers of Gaza around Beit Hanun, which I saw.
Okay, so that wasn't the question. You're not answering the question. Now you're rambling again. You're just trying to dominate. You're just rambling.
I'll let you respond.
I'm spitting.
I mean, how many different points do you have to go on, man? Like, can you just stop spitting and rambling, and can you just stick on one point?
I'll let you respond to all the points,
I can stick on one point for an hour. I can stick on another. But
no,
you asked me a question.
You go in circles and circles and circles until you get lost in your own rambling.
Gaza
And I
was
mean, if
under
anybody
siege on
had like a
October 7th,
Hamas
and Israel was
catchphrase
counting
chart,
the
you
calories
would
that
be the
everyone
one.
was entitled to inside the Gaza Strip. This was reported by Haaretz in 2009.
See, there he goes again on something else.
Israel's Kogat was counting the calories.
Remember the
for each
question.
person in
Remember the
Gaza.
question was it
People were
occupied? And now he's talking about
experiencing
Kogat
deprivation,
and
siege, and occupation in
calories and
Gaza.
everything else.
85% of the
simple to know.
population are
Max,
refugees who are entitled to the right of return under UN Resolution 194 in Gaza. And you're asking me if they were
Loud
occupied.
noises. My name's Max. I can ramble forever.
I'll let you respond to all the points, and we'll get back to the Qatar strike, but there's a lot of points for you to respond to, Matt.
Yeah, right. There's quite a few. So, no, I'm not responding to Netanyahu's definition of terrorism. You're free to go look it up under U.S. law. It actually exists. By all means, go do it.
That is Netanyahu's definition.
When you talked about the Nasser Hospital, I'm sure you're not aware of this, so maybe I did, and I dropped it down in the comment section underneath the video that's pinned up that everybody is over watching on X, that they can go see the Hamas video that was filmed from the Nasser Hospital shortly there before, where they ended up attacking an IDF convoy that was traveling through the area. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that exists.
You justified the killing of journalists just now. You're justifying the killing of journalists.
If you don't mind, I'm trying to respond to your garbage.
I'll give you the
Directly.
opportunity to respond back, Max. Go ahead, Matt. I'll let you respond.
Directly responding to all of your garbage. So that's down in the chat below. There's literal evidence, unlike you've provided, which is just rambling. Literal evidence is now dropped down in the chat below that Hamas was at and occupying the Nasser Hospital and using it to film propaganda videos and launch attacks from. That's there. And you might not like that, but that's a fact. Period. And so while you sit there and you go and you condemn the IDF for doing it and you want to point out these journalists, what you failed to point out was that 6 of those people were actually signed on to Hamas's payroll. So good job
AP
failing to
is on
point that
Hamas's
out.
payroll. Reuters is on Hamas's
6
payroll.
of them are on Hamas's payroll.
AP
And they
is on
had to
Hamas's
have been
payroll.
aware.
Are you insane?
Correct. That's how it works. Same with the ones from Al Jazeera. Correct.
So,
Now, you might not like that, but that's just how it works. They go and they hire independent contractors. When was the last time the Associated Press was allowed to run around inside the Nasser Hospital? Who's behind those cameras?
They were there.
Behind those cameras.
Mariam Abu Daga
So
worked
again,
for AP.
it's dropped down below, and here's Max.
Strike.
You might not like
You're
this,
sick.
Max. Max, you might
you're a
not like
sick
this,
puppy.
but that's what's called a war zone. That's what's called a war zone.
a
And when
hospital is a
journalists
war
go
zone.
into
So now you're for bombing
yes, when
hospitals.
Hamas is there launching attacks from a hospital, it's called a war zone.
So Matt
That's part of
Tardio
it.
is for
And
bombing
underneath
hospitals and
international
killing
law,
journalists.
they have to use proportionality, and it has to be equal to the threat that was established. And that threat was clearly visible in Al-Qassam Brigade's own videos that they ended up publishing prior to that attack. And they were still clearly doing it from that location. And that is known by 6 Hamas members being at that hospital. Period. There's no other way to look about it. And when those journalists enter into a combat zone, because the same thing happened inside of Iraq and the same thing happened in Afghanistan, journalists end up getting killed, especially when they embed with the enemy. If they are embedded with the enemy and they are there with the enemy, that is a risk that they take on. That's what we call being a man and owning up to your own mistakes and sleeping in the bed that you make.
Doctors are the enemy.
No,
Patients
the
are the
Hamas
enemy.
terrorists that
you're
were standing
defining
next to
everyone
them
in
are what got
Gaza as an
killed.
enemy. No,
Well,
actually, there's no law that entitles people to kill everyone in a war zone.
I just said proportionality, and they didn't kill everybody at the hospital. Now you're taking my words out of context to try to appeal to some sort of emotional base.
If you're telling the truth, then why did Netanyahu call that massacre of journalists and rescuers in a double tap strike, which everyone can watch filmed? Why did he call it a tragic mishap? Because he knew that what even you're saying is a lie. I mean,
that's not true. It's actually right down here at the bottom. You're welcome to go
better
look
Gentile
at it.
propaganda.
And just because he calls it a tragic accident or something tragic, when there's multiple people there that ended up getting killed, would you rather?
No, he would say they were terrorists.
Would you rather him not
Israel
seem apologetic towards that? They did call them terrorists. They did call them terrorists, but civilians also got killed. There's this term, Max. There's this term that you should get used to that's called. There's this term that you should get used to. You know, Mario, you said I was going to be able to respond, but he just doesn't let me respond. He just wants to talk over the same Hamas talking points.
I think you've responded to most of the points. I do want to go back to the Qatar strike. Max, I've asked you a question. I'll let you continue responding to the points and maybe bringing it back gradually, Matt, to the strike in Qatar. Striking the peace negotiation team, do you think that was the right decision? And what was the goal of that strike, in your opinion, Matt? Why strike the team that was responding to Trump's proposal?
So one, they are not a political entity. They're a terrorist organization. And they have stuck very firm that the only way that they're going to end up releasing any hostages is if Israel completely and totally pulls out of the Gaza Strip. And Israel has to look at the safety of their civilian population inside of Israel proper. Again, you also had the commander of Hamas in the West Bank that was located there that easily is responsible underneath any law for commanding that attack that took place inside Jerusalem the day prior. That is an imminent threat. That is an ongoing threat, and these are the men that are in control of the lives of those hostages. Now, Israel doesn't have to sit back and wait to go inside Gaza City and try to recover the rest of their hostages. Max might not agree with how they're doing it, but he also hasn't provided an alternative for how to get them out. Because Hamas's doctrine, hold on, I'm not done yet, Max. Hold on, Max, I'm not done. But they have been negotiating for 2 years, and they're still holding on to 20 hostages. They were negotiating when an American ended up getting shot in the back of the head inside Rafah in a tunnel underneath a school. So negotiating with Hamas doesn't work, period. So they are in there to go get those hostages back. And maybe 20 of them are alive. Maybe. Donald Trump just said it the other day. Maybe 20 are alive. So with that being said, those men are directly responsible for the lives of those hostages, and they are directly in control of the lives of those hostages. And whether or not you agree with the legal definition of terrorism here in the United States and abroad, and with kidnapping and hostage taking here and in the UN, it's totally irrelevant. Question is whether or not it was legal and justified. And the answer is yes, it was, because those men were responsible for a terror attack the day prior and are daily responsible for the lives of the hostages that were taken on October 7th.
So what next then, Matt? If Hamas now saying, so the peace negotiation team is apparently not killed, at least the main team's not assassinated, and they survived the strike. But Hamas did say no one is talking about this at the moment regarding peace negotiations. So then what's next for Israel? What's Israel's strategy if you end peace negotiations?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, and then we'll go to Max.
So yeah, it's not going to change. Their goal is to go and finish clearing out Hamas from Gaza City. They need to, and those hostages need to be recovered. If they're even alive at this point, they need to get recovered, and or they need to go ahead and end this thing. I'm not sure how anybody else plans on Hamas being cleared out from Gaza City, being moved down anywhere else. I don't know if Max would like them to sit around and be trapped in the middle of conflict and have even more collateral damage. That's just not acceptable. So they're giving prior warnings and telling them to move out and get out of Dodge, because there is a war and it is coming. You know, you had talked yesterday, and I think it goes to show how little Max understands about war. I watched an interview I think you did with him like 3 days ago, where he was talking about how Hamas would repurpose bombs, and they took one of these repurposed bombs and threw it inside of an Israeli tank. They actually threw an EFP inside of that tank. Do you know what that is, Max? Explosively formed projectile. That's what they ended up throwing inside the tank. That's what they ended up throwing inside the tank down inside of Rafah. Right, that's what they ended up throwing in there. It was an EFP, and they very well was a homemade munition, and they set it up that way, and they have them all over. But you also brought up how,
and that is not
the
terrorism.
Israeli Defense Force. You also brought up. Hold on, because I'm addressing some of your stuff. So you also brought up hostage taking and murdering civilians isn't a right underneath international law.
Okay, then you oppose Israel.
What you also brought up. Hold on. What you also brought up. What you also brought up was putting them. What you also brought up, well, allegedly, right? Because they don't differentiate between hostages.
Not allegedly. According to even Israel's own internal numbers.
Allegedly, that's not. That was one.
How do you wake up every morning seeing shredded children?
I'll let you finish. So Matt, I'll let you.
Because I'm trying to address your points.
Max, I'm gonna give you plenty of time to respond to all the points as soon as Matt is done, because I know there's a lot said again. And Matt, I'll let you finish off, and then Max, I'll let you respond with no interruptions.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make is he also talked about how Israel took a repurposed APC and drove it into a building and exploded it, right? And then he also talked about over in the Al-Zatan neighborhood.
You're putting words in my mouth.
Max, can I finish? Or can I finish?
Well, you keep putting words in my mouth.
People can go and they can take clips of that old one.
And I'll make sure you correct them as well, Max. I'll make sure you correct them.
So he also talked about how 7 Israeli service members ended up getting killed or wounded, or that's the original thought. It was like a mass casualty event. And what you're actually describing is something called like a house-borne IED that took place. And those were down inside Khan Yunis, they were inside of Rafah, and they were also inside the Al-Zatoun neighborhood. So house-borne IEDs, these are booby-trapped buildings rigged to explode. And these munitions are laid out all over Gaza City. They're laid out all across the Gaza Strip. And so would you rather the Israeli Defense Force not take care of those and leave those?
Yeah, I would rather them leave and end the occupation.
Then you're going to have Hamas blow up civilians.
They're invaders. They are colonial invaders and occupiers.
So you're okay with leaving munitions out there?
The whole world wants them to leave.
So I'm going to go to Max.
The whole world doesn't want them to leave. That's false.
No, defending yourself against a colonial invasion is not terrorism, Matt.
That's a lie.
What you are calling for is the recipe for terrorism. You have spent the last 20 minutes almost defending the on-camera slaughter of journalists, including Hussam Abu
That's also a
Masri
lie.
from Reuters, including Mariam Daga from the Associated Press, including a rescue team that was killed in a double tap strike on a hospital. And it's on the record now. You are defending the slaughter of journalists. No one in the world supports that.
I posted about it. It's been on the record for a while.
Except for you and the strange Zionist death cult that you are currently Satan signaling to. In fact, on your own Twitter account, I just looked at it for the first time, you're fantasizing about murdering Jackson Hinkle. You're fantasizing about Israel assassinating Jackson Hinkle. And another post, you're fantasizing about Vladimir Putin getting killed.
And you promoted a Hamas supporter on your own account.
You seem to be part of some
promoted a guy that promoted jihad on October 7th.
Where Tony Montana controls the world, and anybody that doesn't agree with the U.S. just gets simply slaughtered, including internet influencers. And I should mention that Israel has murdered lots of influencers inside the Gaza Strip, as well as academics and writers like my friend Rifat Al-Arir, who never picked up a gun and was targeted in his home, where they killed him, and then they killed his sister, and then they killed his granddaughter, and they killed much of his entire family in targeted strikes after threatening him. And this is happening again and again to the population of Gaza. If you want to talk about terrorism, if you want to talk about the ceasefire, Hamas accepted the August 18th proposal that was put before them. And what happened? Israel responded with massive bombing, more terrorism, because they didn't want that proposal. And Netanyahu can't accept that proposal. And he has as the linchpin of his coalition two fanatics, Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the security minister, who will not accept any ceasefire proposal short of the complete expulsion of the entire Gaza population.
Maxwell, do you
have in writing what Hamas presented to Netanyahu? Do you have in writing
Hamas doesn't present anything to Netanyahu. It's presented through the ceasefire form in Doha that was just attacked.
Do you have that in writing? What was sent, and you
I have it in writing.
You do. And how are you? So how are you able to confirm? How are you able to confirm? Because I'm pretty sure you just said Netanyahu didn't want it and he turned it down. So how are you able to confirm
it down
that Netanyahu
carrying out
read
fire belts on Gaza City?
How are you
he
able to
the Sabra neighborhood, Matt?
So again, how are you able to confirm what you have in your hand is what Netanyahu has presented and he said no to?
Because it's been widely reported by every outlet. Hamas announced it, and it's been reported across the board in Israeli media, including Hebrew language media. Now, I know you take
Israeli media also quotes the Gaza Health Ministry. So does United States media. A lot of people quote the Gaza Health Ministry. That doesn't make them reliable sources. Hell, UN's done it on their own as well. So just because it's written down in the media, it doesn't make it solid. That's not a fact.
Hamas responded positively to a proposal in May 2024. Again, they were met with fire belts and Israeli attacks. 300,000 Israelis, Jewish Israelis, have protested in the past month because Netanyahu rejects every ceasefire proposal.
Right, and we have skinhead Nazis here in the United States of America. That doesn't make the United States of America a bunch of. We have skinhead Nazis that live here in the United States of America.
A large portion of the Israeli population.
That doesn't make no. I'm trying to make a point, and if you'd listen, no, I didn't. You are assuming I am because you're too dense to listen to what I have to say.
No, every time
we have skinhead Nazis here in the United States of America. That doesn't mean the entire United States of America supports a Nazi movement. So just because people inside Israel are protesting,
have a ceasefire?
Just because people in Israel are protesting doesn't mean the entire state of Israel feels that way.
So you just called 300,000 Israelis Nazis.
What do you?
I mean, that is a real Tardio narrative right there.
No, it's not. That is words that you're trying to put in my mouth.
So, Matt, under what circumstances would
Matt, why did you call for Jackson Hinkle to be killed?
I didn't call for Jackson Hinkle
to be killed.
I said it would be nice if he did.
Why did you call?
Because he's friends with enemies of the United States of America.
Should be killed if
no. He's friends and he's promoting false narratives such as yourself, and he's enemies.
Should I be
he's
killed?
Friends and he's living and he's embedded with enemies of the United States of America.
Oh, really?
Enemies of the United States of America. He is a traitor. He is a traitor to the United States of America.
So should I? So you said you compared him to me. So should I be killed? I mean, everyone you don't like should be killed. This is who Israel puts up to defend.
No, this is not who Israel puts up. But nice job trying to defame me. That man was meeting up, and he was down over inside Yemen, and he was over at Nasrallah's funeral, was he not? And now he's over hanging out inside Russia, all places that absolutely hate the United States of America and want to see us killed. So, yeah, on top of that, he started the American Communist Movement. He's not American. He's a giant POS. And personally, I think he's a traitor to the United States of America.
So communists are not American. They should be
Correct.
killed.
Communism is not American. Correct.
Should people who believe in communism be jailed? Do you believe that in America?
People who believe in communism should not be jailed. However,
But you just
people
called for
who
one of them
meet
to
up
be
and
killed.
promote, because I didn't say because he believes in communism. That's not what I said. I didn't say because he believes in communism. Again, you're trying to put
You
words
just said
in my
that.
mouth.
Okay,
No,
so
I didn't.
So Americans.
No. I said communism is not American, and that's a fact.
So you don't believe in the
Communism
First
isn't
Amendment.
American.
So you don't
No,
believe
I don't
in the
believe
First
in people.
Amendment.
No,
You believe
I believe in the
journalists
First
should be
Amendment. I
slaughtered
believe
by
you have the
Israel.
right to say
You
the most
believe rescue
racist,
workers should be slaughtered
stupid
by
things you
Israel.
want, just
You
like
believe
you are.
Jackson Hinkle should be killed because he's a POS, and you don't. And you
Not
think
he's a
embedded with
POS.
the
I believe
enemy.
he's a traitor to
Oh,
the
he's a
United States of
traitor.
America. Correct. He's
So he should be
literally
killed.
running around with the enemies of the United States of America and promoting them.
Okay, well,
But
I think
People
I
who
think it's pretty
fantasize
clear.
about Americans being killed, he promotes. That's
well,
being a traitor.
I think it's pretty clear that you're not really going to be convincing anyone outside of your very strange ideological niche group. But
No,
it does seem like
Americans
Israel-
who are against terrorism do not support Americans that leave America and promote terrorism.
terrorism is just a subjective.
No, it's
fake
not
term that
subjective.
has been
It's by
marketed
definition,
Benjamin
and you don't
Netanyahu.
like it.
You are
It's a
defending the
definition.
biggest terrorist on the
No,
world.
I told
stage.
you the definition
You're
underneath
also
U.S.
defending
law,
a
and you
country
just
that
don't like
practice-
it.
You're also defending a country that practices rape in its prisons of Palestinian prisoners, which has carried out rape on Palestinian
And you're
prisoners.
defending people that literally walked across the border and ended up raping people.
There
on a
was
daily
no
basis.
evidence of rape there.
Of course,
Not
and
one
there's no
survivor
evidence of your
testimony.
rape
No
accusations
forensic
whatsoever.
evidence.
And plenty of rape survivors have came out and spoken about it.
Name one.
And when you end
Name
up
one.
coming out with this
Name
crap,
one.
when you end up coming
Name
out
one.
with this stuff, they were sitting over in front of the UN the other day. You can go look it up.
No,
and
they
when you
weren't.
end up coming out with
No,
this
I
crap,
don't- why
when
do
you
I
end
have
up
to
coming
do all
out
your
with these
work?
false
I do-
accusations trying to
Mario,
say that this wasn't
I want to bring it
happening.
back. I want to bring it back. I want to bring it back.
You are so
I want to
delusional,
bring it
it's
back,
not
guys.
even funny.
Mario,
I do want to
can
bring
you
it back
get
to
someone
Qatar. So
of better quality to
let
debate?
me-
I feel like I'm losing brain cells here. This is just like a complete Tardio narrative, and he's calling for killing everyone.
No, this is a complete
wanna-
Hamas
guys,
narrative
I wanna
that
bring
Max
it back.
Blumenthal is upset.
I mean, this
that
debate
I'm,
has gone
that I'm
full
actually
Tardio.
bringing up valid
I
facts
do,
and
guys.
points.
So-
God
so I wanna
forbid
go
I
back
bring
to
up
the-
actual
Matt,
definitions.
I
Oh,
just,
crap.
I want to go back to the strike. So one thing I asked Max is how involved do you think the US was in those strikes beyond being informed before the strikes? So Max made the point that, and Max, if I put words in your mouth or I get it wrong, let me know. Max made the point that Trump's proposal was not sincere, from what I understand, Max, and was part of the plan to get the leadership of Hamas to come together for Israel to strike the target. Could that be, do you think it's a plausible theory, Matt, or was that a sincere proposal by President Trump?
I think it's a very plausible theory, and I don't see a problem with that theory whatsoever because, again, they're not a political organization. They're a terrorist organization directly responsible for the murder of Americans inside Gaza, inside Israel, and abroad. So I don't have a problem with Trump lying to them, lying to terrorists who quite literally can't be trusted, who killed Americans. So, yeah, I'm okay with it. I hope, actually, that Trump did do that. That would make me
But
smile.
Qatar has facilitated negotiations with other organizations that could be considered terrorists by others. So but what you're saying is that if negotiations are not on the table, the only other solution is for the war to continue. But what if Hamas decide to surrender or accept American and Israeli terms? How could that message be sent to Israel if the negotiators have been assassinated?
Well,
So,
quite frankly, Mario, that's not
even
written in their
even-
ideology, in their charter. Like, Hamas has no concept of surrender. That's quite literally why they launched and did the attacks that they did. It's written in black and white what their overall goal is. Their overall goal has nothing to do with Gaza, it has nothing to do with the West Bank, and everything to do with Israel proper and restoring what they view as Palestine. In their mind, that's what they want to do, and they're able to accomplish it by any means and methods. That's what's written down. It's in their charter in 2017, and you can disagree with that. You can shake your head.
Not in their
but
charter.
a radical religious ideology that they subscribe to is never going to abide by the laws of man. And so you can sit here and you can try to paint it about occupation all you want and everything else, but that is written in black and white, and that's in their own words, and they have exercised
But doesn't mean
demonstrated
they
the
won't
ability
surrender
to
at
do
some.
so.
But everyone has a breaking point. Doesn't mean they won't surrender. There's going to become a point where they have no weapons left or no food left to eat, no weapons left to fight, where they will surrender. Otherwise, the war will never end. And my worry is that when the negotiating team is targeted, and if Qatar does not continue, facilitating those negotiations, it makes it very difficult to end the war.
It doesn't, actually. If Israel would have actually conducted this war properly in the first place, this war would probably be over by now. But because of the Biden administration and restraints that they actually ended up imposing on Israel, such as when Israel wanted to go into Rafah, maybe our U.S.
They went into
hostages would still
Rafah and
be alive.
destroyed it. Rafah is
But
destroyed.
after months and months of waiting, in which time an
So
American
that's the
citizen
proper
lost
way, is
their life.
destroy a whole city.
No, but that's what Hamas gave the option of.
You just
Hamas
said it was.
turned that entire place into a war zone. Listen, Max, I don't know if you've
That's where
ever
they
fought a
are.
war or you've ever even gotten a freaking fist fight in your life, but it doesn't happen, number one, fighting with equality. You don't win a fight by going blow for blow and back and forth. You do it with overwhelming fire superiority. That's how wars are fought. This isn't a scalpel. This isn't a scalpel. This is a military. It's made to break
I don't
shit
know
and
if
kill
you know
people.
how people who
and
are
then when you
fighting
take
to
it a
defend
step
their-
further,
Matt, I don't
and then
know
when you
if you've
take it
ever
a step
fought to-
further and you talk about the infrastructure specifically that Hamas has built into Gaza, turning the
Into
entire
Gaza,
place,
not-
turning the entire Gaza Strip into a massive defensive fighting position, rigging explosives inside of civilian buildings, shooting their own civilians, taking hostages, having endless miles of tunnels, not only around Gaza Strip, but in and out of Egypt as well. Yes,
Well,
some
Matt-
of these things have to happen in order to kill the enemy that's trying to kill you.
Well, I mean, I think Israel needs to be demilitarized and de-radicalized because it's waging war on the entire region, as it has since 1948, when it ethnically cleansed 750,000 Palestinians, mostly to the Gaza Strip. But you wouldn't understand what it's like to fight a war to defend your own land. You fought fake imperialist wars to defend Dick Cheney's stock options. So you can't get into the mentality of the people in Gaza, of the
Actually, I
of the
can't. See,
militants
that's
in
where
Gaza.
you're wrong. See,
You've
because
never
as a
been to
Green
Gaza.
Beret, I
You've
actually
never
live with,
reported
no,
from
see,
Gaza.
that's where you're wrong.
You
Because as a
are-
Green Beret, I actually lived and helped liberate villages that were taken over by ISIS militants.
Those
That's
villages
what
would have
I
been
did, and I
liberated by
lived side by
Syria if
side
the
with those.
CIA
Hold
hadn't
on,
created
and I lived
ISIS.
side by side with those people, and I fought side by side with those
Wow.
people to get rid of radical Islam.
They would have
period.
all
And you get
been
very
liberated
embedded in
by
the culture.
Syrian forces.
No, they
Stop.
wouldn't
Russian-
have
and
been.
Russian forces
Absolutely
wouldn't have
not.
been there.
That
It's
is
just
you and
CIA
your own
and
freaking
not
mind.
Bringing it back,
ISIS
just bring it,
and
bringing
create
it.
Al-Qaeda.
Just,
Let's talk about what you're doing right now and what I'm doing right now, because
What I'm doing right
because
now
the
is
Gaza
quoting
Humanitarian
international
Foundation.
law, actual information. Yes, let's talk about GHF. You want to do
Let's
that?
talk about
Let's
GHF,
it.
because
And
you
the
seem to
failures
have
of
a
the World
very
Food
strong
Program.
interest in GHF. GHF is a group that has replaced the UN food system. It has led to a famine there. And I want to just ask a specific question here, because around 2,000 people have been killed seeking aid at GHF sites by the Israeli army. The BBC
Allegedly.
just reported that UG Solutions has hired 10 members of the Infidel Motorcycle Club, which is an anti-Muslim bike club. These are people who hate Muslims, who are working in a Muslim
from Anthony
area.
Aguilar, right? That's who reported it, Anthony Aguilar. That's
Do
who
you
told
have
that,
any
the known
affiliation
liar.
with? Do you have
Did
any
he tell you that?
affiliation with UG
Is that your
Solutions?
source for that? Is Aguilar your source for that?
No, the BBC. But do you have any
Oh,
affiliation
the
with
BBC.
UG
And who is the
Solutions?
BBC's source for that?
Do you have any
Who is the
affiliation
BBC
with
source?
UG
Who is the
Solutions?
BBC? No, I don't. Who is the BBC source? I
Anthony,
haven't collected a document from anybody.
well, Anthony
So the
Aguilar.
BBC source was Anthony Aguilar, the guy that lied to me on my podcast, the guy that has defamed himself numerous times. He went back and forth on his own statements so many times. And this kid named AKA Amir, his actual name's Abood, is alive. And so that's who your source is going to be for this?
Did you reach out to Anthony Aguilar on behalf of UG Solutions? Because
No,
that's what
I did
Aguilar
not.
claims.
No, I did not reach out.
You have no
So
connection to GHF at all?
No, I don't. So number one,
So you're
I
not a
reached out to
consultant for
UG
UG
Solutions
Solutions.
no, I'm not. I reached out
That
to
would be a
UG
huge scandal,
Solutions.
because
Do you want an answer to your question, or do you just want to sit here and ramble?
It would be a huge scandal if you were connected to GHF.
I'm
in
absolutely
any way.
not connected
Because
to GHF
on your
in
on
any
your
way,
Twitter
or
account,
receive a dime. And by the way, he said that I received money and he had proof. I'm still waiting on that because I haven't received a damn dime from them, and I don't receive a dime from anybody else. And I hope your stuff's clean there, Max.
You take a great interest in defending GHF, and at the same time,
I take a great interest in defending the truth from liars like Anthony Aguilar,
I
who lied. He's a liar.
At the same
that is
time,
a fact. As a matter of fact, the president of the the president of the Special Forces Association parachute team said, and I quote, "He is a pathological liar."
Well, at the same time as you're obsessingly attacking Aguilar, and I'm not Aguilar, I can't personally defend him. At the same time as you're doing that, you're on your Twitter
Well, you
account
used
calling,
him as a source.
You were on your Twitter
I've got
on
to
Twitter
go ahead
calling
and attack
Muhammad
your
a
source.
pedophile.
That is an actual.
You are
that is an
constantly
actual
calling.
thing. What do you call somebody that marries a
just wanna-
6-year-old? And then
Okay,
consummates the
before
marriage at 9.
Why are so many people who are
What do you call somebody that marries a 6-year-old and consummates their marriage at 9?
This is
Max,
a scandal.
What is the
Guys,
actual
moving-
definition? Because words have meaning.
I think
guys,
Tardio.
moving away
What
from
is
this,
somebody that has
Max,
sex with a 9-year-old
Just
girl?
one last,
Max?
guys, moving away
Are
from
you
this, guys,
okay?
moving
No,
away-
I'm curious, Max. Are you okay with grown men having sex with 9-year-old girls?
These are the people that defend GHF. I just wanted to get this on the record. Tardio is the person who defends GHF, and he's out here to prove that the Muslim prophet Muhammad is a pedophile. And they
I think
bring
he's a
these
false
people as
prophet, and that's my
influencers
own
into
religious
Gaza.
belief. Just like they don't think
This is
like
a
they don't
criminal
think Jesus
operation
is
run
God.
by people who hate
I
the
don't think
population of
he
I
Gaza.
want to,
is
Max.
a
I want to go to
prophet.
the question is, guys. I want to ask, one final 2 questions back on the Qatar strikes. I know there's
I'm
a
glad
lot
we got that on the
agree
record.
Yes,
Max,
that's correct. On the record,
doesn't
men
reflect
who
well
have
on
sex
GHF.
with 9-year-old girls are pedophiles.
And
Men
you
who
are
get
defending-
arrested for it in the United States
and you are
should
part
be
of-
tried and
I think did the producers mute? I can't hear you guys unless it's muted on my end. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear? Yeah, I think this is the first time they've used the mute button. I think we've never used it before. So I just want to go back to the next question, Max. As a final point I want to talk about is what happens next. The thing that surprised me the most about this is that for the first time, Israel, they struck Syria, but Syria, initially had the Assad regime. They've struck Yemen. Yemen, the Houthis were striking Israel. They've struck Lebanon. Well, Hezbollah was striking Israel. They've struck Iran. Iran was funding Hezbollah, was funding the Houthis. We've spoken about this. But now they've struck an American ally, a non-NATO ally. So my question to you is, where are the red lines for Israel and what happens next? And what happens to the US-Gulf relationship? And I can't hear you. I'm not sure if the team could unmute. I'm not sure or if it's a glitch on my end because I cannot hear. I think it's a glitch. I cannot hear. You're back. Yeah, Max, go ahead, please. Sorry, on that last question. Yeah.
Well, there are no red lines on Israel. There never really have been real red lines. That's why it's been able to bring hundreds of thousands of settlers into the West Bank, which is now under a wave of settler terror, why it's been able to build a wall in and around the West Bank, why it's been able to place Gaza under siege, occupy 300,000 Palestinians in East Jerusalem, and steal the Syrian Golan Heights while now occupying the other side of the Syrian Golan Heights, why it was able to occupy and invade Lebanon in 1982, slaughter civilians in an aid center in Qana in Lebanon in 1996. I could go on for the next hour about all the crimes that Israel's been able to commit without any red lines, but now it basically controls the Trump incorporation. It controls Trump through the figure of Miriam Adelson, who's donated
Trump wasn't too happy. But Max, Trump wasn't too happy about this. He said, "I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. We are not thrilled about the way that went down. Very unhappy about every aspect."
Trump greenlit that attack. The U.S. greenlit that attack that's been widely reported in the Jerusalem Post. The Israeli government has openly said it. And Trump had no choice. He's controlled by Netanyahu and his cutouts inside the U.S. And I think this was a really instructive forum for everyone watching to see who is defending Israel at this point. They are people like Matt Tardio, who defend the killing of journalists, who defend the killing of rescuers, who think the entire population has to be removed because of terrorism, who call for even online influencers they don't like to be killed, and who see no red lines anywhere and want us to live in a law of the jungle. And it's Israel's law. It's a lawless world under the control of a Zionist regime that will accept no resistance whatsoever and demands total subjugation from all of its neighbors. I mean, look at what they're doing to Syria, which already surrendered and which is welcoming members of Trump Incorporation to push it into the Abraham Accords, and Israel is attacking Syria day after day. So we're going to continue to witness these attacks by Israel on the entire region, including terrorist attacks, assassinations, and the slaughter of the population in Gaza, as long as Israel remains an ethno-supremacist entity. According to the Likud charter, since we're talking about charters, the Likud charter defines Israel as an entity anywhere between the Nile and the Jordan River. So it's an expansive entity that will even go beyond the Jordan River if it's allowed to. And that's why people in the region take up arms against it, to defend themselves against this death cult.
So Matt, just on the point that Max made, why continue striking Syria? Syria's not attacking Israel anymore. The new government, as much as you might hate them or disagree with a lot of their stances or previous stances, they are trying to improve relationships with their neighbors. They are trying to improve their relationship with the US. and potentially with Israel. Why continue striking Syria? And also with Qatar, why not assassinate those members through other means without using fighter jets? You know, like they did in, I think, 2010 in Dubai. You know, Mossad have significant capabilities.
So when you start talking about that, right, you got to have like specific people on the ground in the right place at the right time in order to make it happen. That also puts their lives in danger in order to do that. Specifically, we're talking about Qatar, to have those people on ground in order to do that. You're relying on a lot of human intelligence to make sure that those people are where they're supposed to be at, to make sure that those munitions fall where they're supposed to fall. And Israel, honestly, likely just didn't want to put anybody at risk in order to make that happen. So I couldn't tell you what the decisions were made because I don't have access to all that intelligence, why they chose to drop bombs versus, you know, sending a team on the ground in order to take care of them. And I know that the preferred method would definitely put people on the ground in order to put bullets in them. That way we could show the faces and say, yes, look, they're dead. And then as far as Syria goes, protecting the Druze is very, very important to Israel and to the Druze population inside of Israel. And
but that battle ended. That battle ended a few weeks ago, no?
Right, but you also have some people that are still have been taken hostage by them, and then you also have other different factions that have been moving down there over towards them. The Druze have set up different checkpoints and things around Al-Suwaida, but they are also facing some other issues and problems. And when you talk about like bombing them and things like that, you know, with the bombing outside of the palace, that's why, you know, when you end up having 2 Israeli bombs drop outside of the presidential palace inside of Syria, and then all of a sudden the attacks end up stopping on the Druze, it's pretty telling about who's pulling the strings. You also have numerous chemical weapons facilities that are still in place over inside Syria. A lot of people think that they ended up getting destroyed earlier on before Jelani took control of the country. That's not true. There's tons of them that are actually still left intact. They weren't able to strike all of them, so all of those things are still in existence.
Where are they?
Those are quite frankly just things. I've got an entire map up over on my profile. So there is just, I mean, I'm surprised you didn't find that when you're digging for dirt on me. So surprisingly, you know, there's tons of them that still exist over inside of that country.
So you know where the
those
chemical plants are?
Don't want, so those are things that you don't want to fall into the hands of men like al-Jelani, and that you don't want to have control of those. We saw videos of some of his fighters that fall underneath the, I forget what they call themselves, the Syrian military now, that were actually painting and covering up their vehicles on the way go down to like slaughter the Druze when all of that was happening. And so they are conducting those different attacks, whether they like to say it or not, whether they like to admit it or not, they're doing that. And those types of people, you don't want to have access to chemical weapons. You don't want to have access to the different chemical weapons production facilities either. So those are going to get taken out.
So Matt, you know where the chemical weapons are? Can you direct the CIA there, please?
Can you direct me to the document that you somehow know?
So on that point, I think my internet's starting to play up as well. There's the cables, the Red Sea cables.
This is amazing.
I think I'm.
Uh-oh. We'll never find out where the chemical weapons are.
Yeah,
they're on my profile. You can go look it up.
No, the internet. If I'm talking about the geopolitical situation.
I thought we were going to find the missing CW.
In the Red Sea.
Matt, do you know where the WMD in Iraq are? Matt,
yeah, there was WMD.
Guys,
do you know what WMD? Can you define WMDs, Max?
On that point.
Do you know what the definition
yeah, where's the yellow cake,
Matt? If you guys are,
Matt, do you know what
WMD is, Max? Chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. And there was chemical weapons, over 3,000 of them found inside of Iraq. So you can sit here and you can state that they didn't exist, but
so all those troops did die for something real. So all those troops.
There was actually numerous troops that got wounded by chemical weapons inside of Iraq.
Hey, everybody! The Iraq War was justified.
A moron celebrating the death of U.S. troops.
Just listen to Tardio. It was all good. Dick Cheney was right.
We've discussed a lot more than Qatar. Appreciate seeing you both. I'm pretty confident we could be better prepared for the next debate because there's a lot more points that we're going to be debating next time if you both decide to do it.